Hello y'all and welcome back. So this is the third of 6 videos examining the concept of God's existence. In this video I will argue that God exists. By God I mean a perfectly omniscient, omnipotent, and morally perfect being. I'll begin from the phenomenon of morality. Morality I define as holding and acting on beliefs about moral right and wrong. Where do we get morality? The immediate answer is that we get it from our parents. We are taught these moral truths as young people by those in authority over us. And I'm inclined to agree with Aristotle that when we hear them, we take to them as a duck takes to water. They feel right. But where, in a deeper sense, does morality come from? Here, as so often in philosophical discussions, there are two answers. One is naturalistic, and the other is supernaturalistic. The naturalistic answer is that it comes from evolution, and the supernaturalistic answer is that it comes from God. Now, of course, other answers have been given. Plato holds that forms are the grounds of morality. Forms are eternal, intelligible, perfect essences of things like beauty and goodness. But nobody holds to this theory. Naturalists can't hold to it because forms are supernatural. Theists can't hold to it because nothing can be co-eternal with God. Aristotle, Plato's star pupil, points out myriad problems with the theory at several places in his works, and even Plato seems to turn away from the theory in his later dialogues. So we are left once again, as so often with the big two, God and evolution. So morality evolved or it came from God. But I argue morality cannot have evolved. Here's why. Everybody is familiar with evolutionary explanations. A human trait is explained in evolutionary terms as maximizing the fitness of the individual or the social group. Now, a clever person can come up with evolutionary explanations for literally any human trait. It's not difficult. And morality, holding and acting on beliefs about moral right and wrong, is certainly not exempt from this. Evolutionary theory has, or claims to have, explanations of why we lie, why we tell the truth, why we cheat on our spouses, why we're faithful, why we help those in need, why we're selfish, everything. In my classes, in the course of studying Aristotle, of course, I ask my students, do you think that humans have one final end? Now, students are divided on this pretty much 50-50. Some side with Aristotle and hold that we do. Some take a more postmodern approach and regard the final end view with some skepticism. But whatever your take on this issue, one school of thought holding clearly and firmly that we do have a final end is evolutionary theory. For an explanation to count as an evolutionary explanation, it must show how a particular trait, physical, psychological, behavioral, served at some point to maximize fitness. That is to say, it must show either how individual fitness or the fitness of the social group, our ability safely and reliably to feed, breed, and pass on our genes, was, furthered by that trait. In fact, you can take a strong position indeed here. Evolutionary explanations necessarily explain our traits in terms of the maximization of the fitness of the social group. If an explanation does not does not invoke the fitness of the social group, it ipso facto fails to be an evolutionary explanation. Evolutionary theory explains all traits in terms of the fitness of the social group, and it only explains in terms of the fitness of the social group. Nowhere in philosophy, theology, social science, or politics will you find, in other words, a view that holds more firmly that humans have one final end or purpose. This is incredibly important. Talk of final ends is thus not an accident of the way evolutionary theorists talk, and is not a later accretion to the theory. It is the theory. It is an essential, indeed the essential element in evolutionary theory. Without it, evolution as a theory does not exist. But once you've got your final end fixed, it becomes easy to adjudicate good from bad. What furthers your progress towards your final end is good. What detracts from your progress toward that final end is bad. And this is exactly what evolutionary theory in fact does. Traits are explained as having survived into the present day because they promoted fitness of the social group. They were, in other words, good traits to have. Traits which failed to promote FSG, fitness of the social group, died out. They were bad traits to have. Now, evolutionary theory explains moral right and wrong in terms of the fitness of the social group, the maximization of pleasure, benefit, or utility. So it's a straightforwardly evolutionary explanatory paradigm. Now, this is itself no great revelation, but it means that the weaknesses that beset utilitarianism as a theory also beset evolutionary explanations. Only in the latter case, the stakes are much higher. Now, I'm referring here to instances where what is clearly and unambiguously morally wrong maximizes the fitness of the social group. Cases, in other words, where what we know to be morally right and what evolutionary theory says is morally right come apart. Examples are not hard to find. Supposing that by eliminating a certain number of sick and weak members of society, you can free up resources for the able-bodied members and strengthen the overall gene pool. Suppose that by enslaving several thousand members of the population, you can improve the fitness of the social group for millions. In these instances, it is clear that the action in question is morally wrong, but it is also clear that it maximizes the fitness of the social group. Evolutionary theory thus counts it as clearly right. But that's moral insanity, counting as right something that is clearly morally wrong, counting as good because it maximizes the fitness of the social group and is thus good in the only meaningful sense of good, something that is clearly morally wrong. This is not the claim, of course, that proponents of evolutionary theory claim that these horrible things I'm talking about are in fact right or good or on balance the best and most rational thing to do. They don't. They don't claim that. That's just the point. Their ethics are correct, but their ethics are in stark tension with their metaphysics. That's to say, their view on what morality is and how it came about. So morality cannot have evolved. But we established earlier that it evolves or comes from God. So morality must come from God. Now this makes sense. The theistic claim is that morality comes from a morally perfect being. Morality as we experience it is consistent with this claim. In other words, there's nothing in our moral experience that would give the lie to its being thus grounded, as there is plenty in our moral experience that gives the lie to its having evolved. On this view, God is pure goodness and has given humans knowledge of morality as knowledge of his own moral essence. Of course, this may not be wholly satisfying, but it doesn't need to be wholly satisfying. It just needs to be better than the alternative. And given that the alternative is demonstrably morally insane, I believe it satisfies that demand. For this reason, I believe that morality comes from God. And since God cannot give morality without existing, I believe on these grounds, the grounds of morality, that God exists. Thanks.